I will not live as a ghost. Those 6 words detonated Adrian Blackthorne's world. His wife, the woman he'd treated as breeding stock for 18 frozen months, stood before him with divorce papers and a spine forged in silent suffering. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging. She was leaving. And the terrifying part? He'd spent so long convincing himself he didn't need her that he had never stopped to ask what happened when she stopped needing him. This is the story of a marriage built like a cage, a woman who chose herself over everything, and the man who had to burn himself down to deserve her. If you want to see how far love can fall before it breaks completely, and whether it can climb back, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city, hit that like button, and let's begin. The storm came in black and furious, rattling the leaded windows of Blackthorne Manor like a fist demanding entry. Inside the chapel, candles flickered in their sconces, throwing shadows across stone walls that had witnessed 3 centuries of weddings, christenings, and funerals. Mostly funerals, if Adrian Blackthorne was being honest. He stood at the altar in charcoal wool and cold silver cufflinks, hands clasped behind his back, watching Lillian Everhart approach down the aisle with all the enthusiasm of a woman walking to the gallows. She was beautiful. He'd give her that much. The gown was ivory silk, high-necked and conservative, dotted with seed pearls that caught the candlelight. Her auburn hair was pinned in soft waves beneath a veil that did nothing to hide the exhaustion in her hazel eyes. She looked like a painting, lovely, still, and utterly lifeless. Adrian felt nothing. He'd trained himself not to. The vicar droned through the ceremony with the mechanical efficiency of a man who'd married off half the county's desperate daughters to titled men who needed heirs. Adrian repeated his vows without inflection. Lillian did the same, her voice barely above a whisper. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Adrian kissed her, briefly, coldly. A contractual obligation fulfilled. The handful of guests, mostly her family, looking relieved, and a few of his distant cousins, looking bored, clapped politely. Rain hammered the roof. Someone coughed. And that was it. Adrian Blackthorne, 7th Duke of Greymont, had acquired a wife. The wedding breakfast was a grim affair held in the manor's formal dining room, a cavernous space dominated by a table that could seat 30, but tonight hosted barely a dozen. The food was excellent because Adrian's cook was French and temperamental, but no one seemed to taste it. Lillian sat beside him, posture perfect, fork moving mechanically from plate to mouth. She'd removed her veil but kept her gloves on. He noticed she touched nothing that required her bare hands. Her father, Lord Everhart, a florid man with thinning hair and the nervous energy of someone perpetually one bad investment from ruin, leaned across the table with forced joviality. "A fine match, Your Grace. Fine indeed. My Lillian will make you a splendid duchess. She's been raised for it, you know. Piano, French, watercolors, all the accomplishments." "I'm sure," Adrian said, cutting him off with surgical precision. He took a sip of wine, gaze sliding past Everhart like the man was furniture. "Excuse me." He stood. The table fell silent. "I have estate business to attend to. Please continue without me." Lillian's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time all evening. There was something in her eyes that might have been surprise or might have been hope, but Adrian didn't linger long enough to identify it. He left. Behind him, the conversation resumed in awkward bursts, Lord Everhart's laughter too loud, too desperate. Adrian climbed the main staircase to the 2nd floor, walked the length of the portrait gallery where dead blackthorns glared down at him with varying degrees of disappointment, and locked himself in his study. The room smelled of leather, tobacco, and old paper. He poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and stood at the window, watching the storm savage the gardens below. He'd done what was necessary. The Blackthorne line would continue. The estate would pass to an heir, not some distant cousin who'd sell it off piecemeal. His father's deathbed rant, "Don't you dare let this family die with you, boy," would be silenced. It was practical, logical. The fact that he felt absolutely nothing while doing it was proof he'd chosen correctly. What? Lillian sat through another hour of forced pleasantries before her mother finally whispered that it was time to retire. The older women in attendance, aunts, cousins, her mother, escorted her upstairs with the kind of meaningful looks that made her skin crawl. They brought her to the Duchess's chambers, a suite of rooms she'd been shown exactly once during her brief engagement. It was decorated in shades of rose and cream, elegant and impersonal as a hotel. Someone had lit a fire. The bed, a massive four-poster draped in silk, had been turned down. Her mother kissed her forehead. "Be brave, darling," she whispered. "The first time is always difficult, but you'll adjust. We all do." Then they left her. Lillian stood in the center of the room, still wearing her wedding gown, and tried very hard not to cry. She'd known what this marriage was. Her father had been clear. The Everharts were drowning in debt, their estate mortgaged to the hilt, creditors circling. Adrian Blackthorne needed a wife from respectable lineage. She fit the requirements. It was an exchange, her breeding for his money, her body for his name. No one had pretended it was anything else. But standing here now, alone in a stranger's house, wearing a dress that cost more than her family's annual income, she felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to. She was 22 years old, and her life was already over. A knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. Adrian entered without ceremony. He'd removed his jacket and waistcoat, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked. She searched for the word. Businesslike. Yes, that was it. He looked like a man arriving for an appointment. He closed the door behind him. "You should undress," he said. "Not let me help you? Not are you nervous? Just a flat statement of fact." Lillian's hands shook as she reached for the buttons at her neck. There were dozens of them, tiny pearl things that required patience she didn't have. After a moment, Adrian crossed the room and turned her around, fingers working the fastenings with surprising efficiency. "My mother's wedding gown had similar buttons," he said. It wasn't conversation, just explanation. "I helped her lady's maid once when I was a boy." The gown loosened. Lillian caught it before it fell, holding it against her chest. Adrian stepped back. "I'll give you a moment." He walked to the window, presenting his back. Lillian struggled out of the dress, the corset, the layers of silk and linen, until she stood in only her chemise. She climbed into bed and pulled the covers to her chin. "I'm ready," she whispered. Adrian turned. His face was expressionless as he unbuttoned his shirt, removed it, draped it over a chair. His torso was lean, scarred in places. A thin white line across his ribs, another on his shoulder. He didn't explain them. He extinguished most of the candles, leaving only one burning on the bedside table, then joined her in bed. What followed was mechanical, clinical. He touched her only where necessary, moved with the efficiency of someone completing a task, and when it was over, he rolled away without a word. Lillian lay there, staring at the canopy above, feeling something inside her crack. This was her wedding night. This was her life now. The silence stretched. Rain continued to batter the windows. After what felt like an eternity, Adrian spoke. "You should understand something." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "I need an heir. That's the beginning and end of why you're here. I don't require companionship, conversation, or affection. You'll be provided for. You'll want for nothing materially. But don't mistake this arrangement for something it isn't." He paused. "You are a vessel, nothing more." The words landed like stones. Lillian didn't respond. Couldn't. Her throat had closed entirely. Adrian continued, relentless. "We'll share a bed until you conceive. After that, you're welcome to your own chambers. You'll have free run of the estate, within reason. There are certain rooms I keep locked. Respect that. You may redecorate your quarters as you see fit. Request funds through Mrs. Hartwell, the housekeeper. She'll manage your household accounts." He turned slightly, just enough that she caught his profile in the candlelight. "Do you understand?" Lillian forced herself to speak. "Yes." "Good." He turned back to face the wall. "Blow out the candle." She did. And in the darkness, Lillian Blackthorne, Duchess, wife, vessel, let the tears come silently, because if she made a sound, she thought she might shatter completely. Morning arrived gray and cold. Lillian woke alone. Adrian's side of the bed was empty, the sheets already cool. She had no idea when he'd left. A maid appeared shortly after, a young woman named Mary with kind eyes and a Yorkshire accent bringing tea and toast and acting as though nothing unusual had occurred. "His Grace takes breakfast at 6, ma'am," Mary explained while laying out a simple day dress. "He'll be in his study most of the morning. Luncheon is at 1, but he usually takes it alone. Mrs. Hartwell will give you a tour of the house after you've eaten, if that suits." Lillian nodded numbly. The tour was exhaustive and exhausting. Blackthorn Manor was enormous, 50 rooms at least, spread across 3 floors and 2 wings. There was a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a music room with a grand piano gathering dust, a conservatory that had been shut up for years, and a portrait gallery where generations of Blackthorns stared down with identical expressions of cold judgment. Mrs. Hartwell, a severe woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair, narrated in clipped tones. "The master suite is in the east wing. Your chambers are adjacent. The west wing contains guest rooms, mostly unused. The 3rd floor houses servants' quarters and storage. The ground floor you've seen: dining room, drawing room, morning room, library, ballroom. We rarely entertain." She paused before a set of heavy oak doors. "His Grace's private study. You are not to enter without invitation." "I understand," Lillian said quietly. Mrs. Hartwell's expression softened fractionally. "It's not personal, Your Grace. The late Duke, well, His Grace values his privacy." They moved on. The tour ended in the gardens, or what remained of them. Once they must have been magnificent. Now they were a tangle of overgrown hedges, choked flower beds, and paths disappearing beneath weeds. In the center stood a fountain, dry and cracked, draped in dead ivy. "The late Duchess's project," Mrs. Hartwell said, voice carefully neutral. "After she passed, His Grace ordered them left alone. No one tends them now." Lillian stared at the ruined beauty. "How long ago did she die?" 15 years, Your Grace. 15 years of deliberate neglect. 15 years of letting something beautiful rot. Something twisted in Lillian's chest. Days blurred into weeks. Adrian kept to his word. She wanted for nothing material. Her wardrobe filled with gowns she had no occasion to wear. Her jewelry box collected pieces she never touched. The household ran with silent efficiency, meals appearing precisely on time, fires always lit, every surface gleaming. But she was utterly, completely alone. Adrian came to her bed every 3rd night, like clockwork. The encounters never varied, quick, quiet, purposeful. Afterward, he left. They never shared breakfast, rarely crossed paths during the day. When they did, he nodded politely, asked if she needed anything, and disappeared into his study before she could answer. She learned his patterns through observation. He rose at 5, rode his stallion, a temperamental beast named Phantom, for an hour before dawn, returned, bathed, took breakfast alone while reading correspondence, spent mornings managing estate business, took luncheon in his study. Afternoons were spent either riding the estate boundaries or locked in the library. He took dinner at 8, always alone, always with a single glass of wine. He spoke to servants with curt efficiency, never raised his voice, never smiled. The household feared him, she realized, respected him, certainly. He was fair, paid well, demanded competence but not cruelty, but there was no warmth, no connection. He was a ghost in his own home, and she was becoming one too. The realization came one morning as she passed a mirror in the hallway and barely recognized herself. She'd lost weight. Her face had taken on a hollow quality, eyes too large, skin too pale. She looked like the portraits in the gallery, beautiful, cold, dead. She'd stopped playing piano because no one listened, stopped reading because the words blurred, stopped trying to make conversation at the dinner table because Adrian had stopped attending entirely. The silence was eating her alive. It was Mary who saved her, in a way. The maid had been helping her dress one morning when she noticed Lillian staring blankly out the window. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but you ought to get some air. It's a fine day for November." Lillian blinked. "Is it?" "Oh, yes, ma'am. Clear as glass. Be ashamed to waste it indoors." So Lillian walked. She pulled on a spencer and half boots and slipped out through the conservatory door, following the overgrown path into what had once been the Duchess's garden. Close up, the devastation was worse. Rose bushes had reverted to wild thorns. Perennials choked each other out. The fountain was home to dead leaves and stagnant water. But beneath the neglect, she could see the bones of something beautiful. Curved paths designed to catch morning light. Terraced beds positioned for drainage. A small folly in the corner. A stone bench beneath a wrought iron arbor, now collapsed. Her mother had loved gardens. Before the money ran out, before the creditors came, their estate had boasted prize-winning roses. Lillian had spent childhood summers helping her mother prune and plant, dirt under her nails, sun on her face. She'd been happy then. Without thinking, she knelt and began pulling weeds. It was stupid. She was a duchess, not a gardener. She'd ruin her dress, dirty her hands, and for what? Adrian had explicitly ordered this place left alone. But she couldn't stop. Her hands moved of their own accord, clearing ground around a struggling lavender plant, freeing a buried stone edging, uncovering what might have been a bed of herbs. The work was physical, grounding. For the first time in weeks, her mind quieted. She didn't hear Adrian approach. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked like a whip. Lillian jerked upright, dirt streaking her skirts, a handful of weeds clutched in her fist. Adrian stood at the edge of the garden, still in riding clothes, Phantom's reins in one hand. His face was furious. "I told Mrs. Hartwell this garden was not to be touched." "I know," Lillian said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm sorry. I just thought... You thought wrong." He bit off each word. "My mother built this garden. When she died, I ordered it sealed. That order stands." "But it's dying." "I don't care." The cold finality in his voice should have ended it, should have sent her scurrying back inside, apologetic and small. Instead, something snapped. "Well, I do." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I care," Lillian said, louder now. "I care that something beautiful is rotting for no reason. I care that your mother built this and you're letting it die out of, what, grief? Pride? I don't even know which because you won't talk to me. I don't owe you explanations. No, you just owe me basic human decency." The words burst out, weeks of silence combusting. "I know what this marriage is. You've made it abundantly clear. But I live here too, Adrian. I exist. And I won't apologize for trying to make something grow instead of just withering quietly in my rooms like you want me to." The garden fell silent. Phantom shifted, nickering softly. Adrian's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously soft. "You will leave this garden alone. That is not a request." He turned on his heel and walked away, leading Phantom toward the stables, boots crunching on gravel. Lillian stood there, trembling, the handful of weeds still clutched in her fist. She'd lost. Of course she'd lost. She threw the weeds down and fled back to the house, taking the servants' stairs to avoid being seen, locking herself in her chambers until Mary's soft knock announced dinner. She couldn't eat. That night, Adrian didn't come to her bed, or the next night, or the night after that. An entire week passed in crushing silence. Lillian waited, nerves fraying, for some kind of confrontation or consequence, but Adrian simply avoided her. The few times they passed in hallways, his gaze slid past her like she was wallpaper. She'd angered him, and his response was erasure. It shouldn't have hurt more than the coldness, but somehow it did. Wucham. 10 days after the garden incident, Lillian was summoned to the morning room by Mrs. Hartwell. "His Grace requests your presence, ma'am." Lillian's stomach dropped. She found Adrian standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn when she entered. "You asked why I sealed the garden," he said without preamble. Lillian hovered near the doorway, uncertain. "My mother loved it," Adrian continued, voice flat. "Spent every moment she could out there, called it her sanctuary. When my father was in one of his moods..." He stopped, started again. She'd disappear into those hedges, and he couldn't find her. It drove him mad. He turned slightly, profile sharp against the gray morning light. "When she died, he ordered the gardeners to rip it out. All of it. I was 12. I fought him. First time I'd ever raised my voice to him. He beat me unconscious and did it anyway." Lillian's breath caught. I spent 3 years replanting every bush, every flower, exactly as she'd had it, worked in secret, bribed the undergardeners to help. When it finally bloomed again, I sealed it. Because if I let anyone touch it, if I let it change even slightly, then what he destroyed would be gone forever. The silence was suffocating. "I'm sorry," Lillian whispered. "I didn't know." "How could you?" Adrian's voice held no inflection. "I don't speak of it." He moved toward the door, pausing beside her. "Do as you wish with the garden. I don't have the energy to police it anymore." Then he was gone. Lillian stood alone in the morning room, her heart hammering, understanding clicking into place like a key in a lock. Adrian wasn't cold because he didn't feel. He was cold because he felt too much, and the only way he'd survived was to bury it so deep, even he couldn't find it anymore. What? She returned to the garden the next morning. This time, she brought proper tools: shears, a spade, work gloves borrowed from the potting shed. She started small, clearing the area around the fountain, cutting back the worst of the overgrowth, pulling ivy from the folly. The work was hard. Her muscles ached. Blisters formed on her palms despite the gloves. But for the first time since her wedding night, she felt alive. Days passed. She fell into a rhythm: mornings in the garden, afternoons reading or sketching plans for what to plant come spring, evenings alone in her chambers. Adrian never commented, never visited the garden. But one morning, she found a stack of leather-bound journals on the bench in the folly. They were old, pages yellowed, filled with elegant handwriting and pressed flowers. Her mother-in-law's garden journals. Adrian must have left them. Lillian opened the first volume with trembling hands and read about a woman who'd found peace in growing things, who'd survived a brutal marriage by nurturing beauty in the margins. She read until the light failed, and understood, finally, what she had to do. If she was going to survive this, truly survive, not just endure, she couldn't wait for Adrian to change, to soften, to see her. She had to choose herself. She had to tend to her own survival, the way his mother had tended these gardens, even if the man she'd married never noticed, even if she remained alone forever. She would not let this place kill her the way it had killed the woman who came before. Winter deepened. The estate transformed into something from a Gothic novel: bare trees clawing at gray skies, frost glittering on dead grass. The manor itself hunched against the cold like a sleeping beast. Lillian's garden work paused by necessity. Frozen ground couldn't be turned. Instead, she spent hours in the library reading agricultural texts, seed catalogs, her mother-in-law's journals. Adrian maintained his distance. Until the dinner party. It was Mrs. Hartwell who delivered the news, voice carefully neutral. "His Grace is hosting Lord and Lady Ashford for dinner tomorrow evening. You're expected to attend." Lillian looked up from her book, startled. "I am." "You're the Duchess, ma'am." It would be noted if you didn't. The Ashfords were neighboring gentry, old money, old name, the sort of people who moved in Adrian's circles. Lillian had never met them. The next evening, she dressed carefully in deep green silk, Mary pinning her hair into something elegant. Her hands shook while fastening her mother's pearls. This would be her first public appearance as Adrian's wife. The first time anyone in society would see them together. She descended the stairs just before 8 to find Adrian waiting in the entrance hall, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked up, gaze skating over her with the efficiency of someone checking off a list. "You look acceptable," he said. "Not beautiful. Not lovely. Acceptable." Lillian swallowed the hurt. "Thank you." The Ashfords arrived in a flurry of cold air and expensive perfume. Lord Ashford was a portly man with thinning hair and a hearty laugh. Lady Ashford was thin, sharp-featured, dressed in burgundy silk that probably cost more than Lillian's entire trousseau. "Blackthorn! Good of you to finally drag yourself into civilization," Lord Ashford boomed, pumping Adrian's hand. "And this must be the new Duchess. My dear, we've been dying to meet you. The whole county's been talking." "How lovely," Lillian managed. Lady Ashford's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes. Such a surprise when Adrian announced his engagement. We'd all quite given up hope he'd marry." The barb was delicate but unmistakable. Dinner was excruciating. They gathered in the formal dining room, too large for 4 people. the space swallowing conversation. Courses appeared and disappeared. Lord Ashford dominated the conversation, gossiping about county politics and neighbors' scandals. Lady Ashford picked at her food and made occasional cutting observations about people Lillian had never met. Adrian participated minimally, answering direct questions with monosyllables, otherwise focused on his plate. Lillian tried. She really did. She asked polite questions, laughed at Lord Ashford's jokes, complimented Lady Ashford's gown, but she could feel the other woman's assessment, cold and thorough. After the main course, Lady Ashford turned to her with a smile like cut glass. "So tell me, my dear, how are you finding married life?" The room went very quiet. "It's an adjustment," Lillian said carefully. "I'm sure. Such a large house, so isolated. You must find it lonely." "I keep myself occupied." "Oh, how charming. With needlework, watercolors?" The condescension was thick enough to choke on. "Actually, I've been restoring the gardens." Lady Ashford's eyebrows rose. "The gardens? Good heavens, isn't that what groundskeepers are for?" "I find it rewarding." "How quaint." The word dripped poison. Lord Ashford cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Speaking of the estate, Blackthorn, how are the tenants faring this winter? Harsh season." Adrian launched into a discussion of rents and repairs. Lady Ashford turned her attention to her wine glass, clearly bored now that she'd drawn blood. Lillian sat very still, maintaining her composure through sheer will. When dinner finally, mercifully ended, they retired to the drawing room for brandy. Lillian excused herself after a polite interval, pleading fatigue. No one objected. She climbed the stairs to her chambers, dismissed Mary, and sat on the edge of her bed in her expensive dress, feeling like an absolute failure. She'd embarrassed herself, embarrassed Adrian, proven every assumption about her inadequacy correct. A knock at her door made her jump. "Come in," she called, expecting Mary. Adrian entered instead. He'd shed his jacket, waistcoat unbuttoned, looking rumpled in a way she'd never seen him. "You left early," he said. "I was tired." "You were humiliated." The bluntness shocked her. Lady Ashford is a viper," Adrian said flatly. "Always has been. She takes pleasure in making others uncomfortable. Don't take it personally. She thinks I'm inadequate. She thinks everyone is inadequate." He moved to the window, staring out at nothing. "For what it's worth, you handled yourself well. Better than most would." It wasn't exactly a compliment, but coming from Adrian, it felt like one. "Thank you," Lillian said quietly. He nodded once and turned to leave. "Adrian?" He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Why did you invite them?" A long silence. "Because it was expected," he said finally. "The new Duchess should be introduced to county society. That was the first of many such dinners we'll be obligated to host." "I see." He left without another word. Lillian sat alone in the darkness, understanding settling over her like snow. This was her life now. Not just Adrian's coldness, but society's judgment. Not just isolation, but performance. She would be perpetually on display, perpetually found wanting, perpetually alone, even in rooms full of people. The cage she'd walked into was so much larger than she'd realized, and so much harder to escape. The dinner with the Ashfords proved to be merely the opening salvo. Over the next month, Adrian scheduled 3 more social evenings, each one a fresh humiliation dressed in silk and silver. The Harrisons, the Pembrokes, the Winthrops. Different faces, same script. They arrived in gleaming carriages, air-kissed her cheeks, and spent the evening dissecting her inadequacies with surgical precision. Too quiet, too provincial, too common, despite her father's title. And where was the heir? Surely that was the whole point. The whispers weren't even subtle. Lillian endured them because she had no choice. She smiled through barbed compliments about her quaint accent, her simple taste in dress, her interesting choice to spend time gardening instead of paying proper calls. Adrian never defended her. He sat at the head of his table, wine glass in hand, and let them tear her apart piece by piece. His face remained impassive, his contributions to conversation minimal. If he noticed the cruelty, and he must have, he gave no indication. After the Winthrops departed, Lillian found him in his study nursing a brandy. Why do you let them speak to me that way? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Adrian looked up from his ledger, expression unchanged. Let them. You sit there and say nothing while they... She stopped, trying to control her voice. They mock me, to my face, and you act like you don't even hear it. What would you have me do? Challenge them to duels? Create a scene? I'd have you acknowledge that I'm a person, that I exist. Adrian set down his pen with deliberate care. You're being dramatic. The dismissal was casual, absolute. Dramatic, Lillian repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. Of course. How foolish of me to expect basic respect. You're the Duchess of Greymont. You have respect. I have a title. That's not the same thing. Adrian's jaw tightened fractionally, the only sign she'd landed a blow. Is there anything else? I have accounts to finish. Lillian stared at him, this man she'd married, this stranger who shared her bed but wouldn't meet her eyes, and felt something inside her shift, not break. Breaking would have been cleaner. This was more like a foundation cracking, subtle and dangerous. No, she said quietly. Nothing else. She left him to his ledgers and his isolation, climbing the stairs to her chambers with the weight of futility pressing down on her shoulders. Mary was waiting to help her undress. Rough evening, ma'am? They're all rough, Lillian said, then immediately regretted it. Servants talked. The last thing she needed was her misery becoming downstairs gossip. But Mary's face held only sympathy. If it helps, ma'am, the staff thinks you're doing admirably. Mrs. Hartwell says you've got more spine than the last 3 duchesses combined. The last 3 duchesses? Oh, Mary's face colored. I shouldn't have. His Grace's grandmother and his mother and, well, they all found it difficult here. What happened to them? Mary busied herself with the buttons on Lillian's dress, not meeting her eyes. The old Duke was a hard man, ma'am. His Grace's grandfather, too. Some houses just carry weight, you know? Lillian knew. She could feel it in the walls, the portraits, the cold stones. This place had been built on duty and disappointment, generation after generation of loveless marriages producing loveless children who grew into loveless adults. Adrian wasn't cruel by nature. He'd been trained into it. The realization should have softened something in her. Instead, it just made her tired. Thank you, Mary. That will be all. When she was finally alone, Lillian stood at her window and looked out over the darkened gardens. Somewhere in that tangle of dead growth was the life she was trying to cultivate. Small, stubborn, probably doomed. But hers. February brought rain instead of snow, endless, hammering sheets of it that turned the grounds to mud and trapped everyone indoors. Lillian's garden work stalled completely. The house felt smaller with each passing day, walls pressing in, silence growing louder. She'd taken to spending afternoons in the library, partially because the books were good, and partially because Adrian was never there during daylight hours. She could breathe without being reminded of everything she lacked. She was reading agricultural theory, dry stuff about crop rotation and soil composition, when the door opened. Adrian entered, stopped short when he saw her. I didn't realize you used this room. I can leave. No. He moved to the desk in the corner, gathering papers. I just need to retrieve something. They existed in awkward silence, Lillian frozen on the settee, Adrian shuffling through documents. Rain drummed against the windows. The clock on the mantel ticked. What are you reading? Adrian asked suddenly. Lillian blinked, surprised he'd spoken. Townsend's treatise on estate management. His eyebrows rose fractionally. Interesting choice. I thought it might help, with the gardens, understanding drainage and... She trailed off, feeling foolish. Never mind. Adrian studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. My mother read that same volume. She annotated it heavily. There's a copy in her study, if you'd like to borrow it. Her study? 3rd floor, west wing. I'll have Mrs. Hartwell show you. He gathered his papers and left before she could respond. 2 hours later, Mrs. Hartwell led her up narrow stairs to a small room tucked under the eaves. It was dusty, clearly unused for years, but the personality remained. Watercolor landscapes on the walls, pressed flowers in frames, shelves overflowing with botanical texts. His Grace hasn't been in here since she died, Mrs. Hartwell said softly. But he said you were to take what you needed. Lillian ran her fingers along the spines of books, her throat tight. She would have liked you, I think, Mrs. Hartwell continued. You've got her determination. Was she happy here? The housekeeper's expression shuddered. She made the best of it, Your Grace, same as we all do. It wasn't an answer, but it was honest. Lillian spent the rest of the afternoon in that small room, reading margin notes in faded ink, learning about a woman who'd survived by finding beauty in small things. It felt like receiving advice from a ghost. When she finally descended for dinner, Adrian was already in the dining room, seated at the too large table. For once, he didn't take his meal in the study. They ate in silence until Lillian found her courage. Thank you. For the study. Adrian nodded, cutting his venison with precision. The books are useful. No point in them gathering dust. Still, it was kind. He looked up sharply, as if kindness was an accusation. It's practical, nothing more. But his ears had gone slightly red, and Lillian realized with a start that he was embarrassed, that this small gesture, opening his mother's sanctuary, had cost him something. She didn't push, just returned to her meal, the silence between them fractionally less hostile than before. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. Lillian was taking tea in the morning room when Mrs. Hartwell appeared, expression grave. Your Grace, you have a visitor, your mother. Lillian's teacup rattled against the saucer. My mother? Here? Arrived without notice, ma'am. She's in the entrance hall. Lillian found her mother pacing the black and white marble, looking diminished and anxious in travel-worn clothes. Lady Everhart had aged in the 3 months since the wedding, new lines around her mouth, gray threading her hair. Mama, what's wrong? Her mother's face crumpled. Oh, Lillian, I'm so sorry to arrive unannounced, but I didn't know what else to do. Your father… She stopped, swallowed hard. The creditors came. They're seizing the house. The words landed like physical blows. What? It's worse than we thought. Much worse. He'd been borrowing against expectations of your settlement, but His Grace… She lowered her voice. His Grace settled very little cash up front. Most of it's tied to the birth of an heir. Lillian's stomach turned to ice. How much time do you have? A month, perhaps 6 weeks if our solicitor can delay. But Lillian, your father's talking about fleeing to the continent, leaving me to face them alone. I don't know what to do. The desperation in her mother's voice was awful to hear. Come, Lillian said, taking her arm. Let's go somewhere private. She led her mother to the small sitting room, ordered tea, and listened as the full scope of the disaster unfolded. Her father had been gambling, borrowing from dangerous men. The marriage settlement was supposed to solve everything, but Adrian's solicitors had been too clever, tying most of the funds to conditions that hadn't been met. An heir. Always, it came back to that. I wouldn't ask, her mother said, twisting her handkerchief, but if you could speak to His Grace, perhaps he could advance a portion of the settlement early, just enough to satisfy the most pressing debts? I can try, Lillian said, though her heart sank. But he's not… We're not… She couldn't finish the sentence. Her mother reached across and gripped her hand. I know this marriage isn't what you hoped, but you made a sacrifice for the family. Now I'm begging you to make one more. That night, Lillian waited until Adrian came to her chambers, their thrice-weekly ritual. But before he could begin the mechanical process, she spoke. I need to ask you something. He paused, already shirtless, expression wary. What? My father's creditors are seizing our estate. My mother came today. She's desperate. I know the settlement terms, but I thought perhaps, if you could advance a portion early… No. The word was flat, final. Adrian, please. The terms were clear. Payment upon the birth of an heir. That was agreed. My family will be destitute. Your family's finances are not my concern. They're my family. Adrian's expression didn't change. And they sold you to solve their problems. Now, they want more. The answer is no. Lillian felt heat rising in her chest, her throat. You're punishing them for my father's mistakes. I'm enforcing a contract. If your father had been honest about his debts, my solicitors would have structured things differently. He lied. That's not my problem. You're a duke. You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. What difference would it make to... The difference, Adrian interrupted, voice sharp now, is principle. I will not be manipulated. Not by your father, not by your mother's tears, and not by you. The accusation stung like a slap. I'm not manipulating you. I'm asking for help. You're asking me to reward incompetence and dishonesty. I won't do it. He turned toward the door. Wait. Where are you going? This conversation is over. Adrian, please. He left. The door clicked shut with terrible finality. Lillian stood alone in her nightgown, shaking with rage and helplessness, and something worse, the crushing realization that she had no power here. None. She was completely, utterly dependent on a man who viewed compassion as weakness. She'd never felt more trapped in her life. Her mother stayed 3 days before returning home, defeated. Lillian couldn't bear to watch her leave, so she hid in the gardens, attacking dead rose bushes with pruning shears like they'd personally offended her. She was hacking at a particularly stubborn branch when she heard voices. Adrian's and another man's, older, rougher. The drainage is failing in the lower fields. If we don't address it before spring planting, you'll lose half the crop. Cost? 200 pounds, maybe 250 if we have to replace the tiles. Do it. Lillian went very still. 200 pounds, authorized without hesitation for drainage tiles, but not 1 penny for her family. The rage that had been simmering for days boiled over. She dropped the shears and marched around the hedge to find Adrian standing with his estate manager, reviewing plans. Your Grace, the manager said, startled. Didn't see you there. Mr. Winters, would you excuse us? Adrian said, voice tight. The manager departed quickly. Adrian turned to Lillian with cold eyes. Whatever you're about to say, 200 pounds, Lillian said. You just authorized 200 pounds for tiles, but my family, people who are about to lose everything, you won't spare a fraction of that. Those are different circumstances. How? How are they different? The estate is an investment. Your family is a bottomless pit. They're human beings. They're adults who made catastrophically poor choices. Adrian's voice rose to match hers, the first time she'd heard genuine anger from him. I am not responsible for cleaning up after every incompetent fool who crosses my path. Your father gambled away a fortune and lied to my solicitors. Your mother enabled him for years. I owe them nothing. You owe me something, Lillian shouted. I'm your wife. You're a name on a contract. The words hung in the air between them, brutal and honest. Lillian felt something in her chest crack clean through. Yes, she said quietly. I suppose I am. She walked away, leaving him standing in the garden, and this time she didn't look back. That night marked a shift. Adrian didn't come to her chambers, not that night, or the next, or the one after that. A week passed in frozen silence. Lillian stopped attending dinners, stopped trying to cross paths with him in hallways. She threw herself into preparing for spring planting with an intensity that bordered on obsession, spending hours with her mother-in-law's journals, sketching bed layouts, calculating seed quantities. Mary tried to draw her out. You're working yourself to bone, ma'am. I need to stay busy. His Grace has been asking after you. Lillian looked up sharply. Has he? Ask Mrs. Hartwell if you were ill. She told him you were just tired. Good. But her heart hammered traitorously. He'd noticed her absence. Whether that meant anything, she didn't know. It was Mrs. Hartwell who delivered the next blow. Your Grace, I thought you should know. There's been talk in the village. Lillian set down her pen. What kind of talk? About you. About the marriage. The housekeeper's discomfort was obvious. People are saying, well, they're saying His Grace made a poor choice, that you're not... She stopped. Not what? Not suitable. Not producing results. The euphemism was clear. Lillian's face burned. I see. It's just gossip, ma'am. Servants chatter. but I thought you should be aware. After Mrs. Hartwell left, Lillian sat very still, hands clenched in her lap. Not suitable, not producing results, as if she were livestock that had failed to breed on schedule. The humiliation was total, and the worst part? They were right. She wasn't pregnant, months of cold, mechanical coupling, and nothing to show for it. Her one purpose, the only reason she was here, unfulfilled. She was failing at the single job she'd been given. That evening, against her better judgment, she went down to dinner. Adrian was there, looking surprised to see her. They ate in silence for several minutes before he spoke. "Are you well?" Mrs. Hartwell said, "I'm fine. You've been absent. I wasn't aware my presence was required." Adrian set down his fork. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Exactly what I said." His jaw tightened. "If this is about your family." "It's not about my family. It's about everything. This marriage, this house, this—" She gestured helplessly. "This entire charade." "Charade? You don't want a wife. You want a broodmare. And I'm failing even at that." Adrian went very still. "Where is this coming from?" "The village. The servants. Your friends. Everyone knows I'm inadequate. Everyone's waiting for you to realize your mistake and what? Send me back, find a replacement? That's absurd." "Is it?" Lillian stood, chair scraping back. "You've made it very clear what I am to you, a vessel, a name on a contract, so forgive me if I don't pretend this is something it's not." She left him sitting alone at the table, chest heaving, eyes burning. She'd meant to feel powerful, speaking that truth. Instead, she just felt broken. The confrontation changed nothing and everything. Adrian began avoiding her entirely, eating in his study, riding out early, returning late. When they did cross paths, the air between them was electric with unsaid things. March arrived with hesitant sun and ground finally soft enough to work. Lillian threw herself into the gardens with renewed desperation. She hired 2 boys from the village to help with heavy labor, trading household allowance for their time. Together they cleared beds, turned soil, began the slow work of restoration. The physical work helped. She could lose herself in the rhythm of dig, plant, water. Could forget, for hours at a time, that her life was falling apart. She was elbow deep in a bed of iris rhizomes when she heard footsteps. Lady Ashford stood at the edge of the garden, parasol in hand, looking like she'd stepped into a barnyard. "Good heavens, you're actually doing manual labor!" Lillian sat back on her heels, wiping dirt from her face. "Lady Ashford, I wasn't expecting visitors." "Clearly." The older woman's gaze raked over her filthy dress, bare hands, disordered hair. "I came to call on Adrian, but he's apparently riding. His housekeeper suggested I might find you here." The emphasis on "here" dripped with disdain. "I'm restoring the gardens," Lillian said, hearing the defensiveness in her voice and hating it. "Yes, I've heard about your little project." Lady Ashford stepped carefully onto the path, avoiding mud. "The whole county's talking about it, actually. The Duchess who plays at being a gardener. They find it quaint." "I don't care what they find it." "You should." Lady Ashford's voice sharpened. "You represent this house now. Your behavior reflects on your husband. And frankly, my dear, you're making him look ridiculous." Lillian stood slowly, anger building. "I'm making him look ridiculous? Prancing about in the dirt like a common farmer? Failing to produce an heir after, how many months now? Appearing at exactly one county gathering before hiding yourself away?" Lady Ashford's smile was poisonous. "Adrian made a mistake marrying you. Everyone knows it. The question is how long before he does something about it." The words landed exactly as intended, devastating and precise. "Get out," Lillian said quietly. "Excuse me?" "Get out. This is my home. These are my gardens, and you are not welcome." Lady Ashford's eyes narrowed. "You're going to regret speaking to me this way." "No," Lillian said, surprised by her own steadiness. "I really don't think I will." They stared at each other across the flower bed, Duchess and Countess, both trapped in their own ways, both playing a game with rules written by dead men. Finally, Lady Ashford turned with a swish of silk. "Adrian will hear about this." "I'm sure he will." Lillian watched her go, heart hammering, hands shaking with adrenaline. She'd just made an enemy of one of the most powerful women in the county. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt almost alive. Adrian cornered her in the library that evening. Lady Ashford paid me a visit in town. Lillian didn't look up from her book. I'm aware. She said you were unspeakably rude. She came to my garden to tell me I'm an embarrassment. I asked her to leave. She's the Countess of Ashford. I don't care if she's the Queen of England. Lillian closed her book with a snap. I'm tired of being insulted in my own home. She had no right. You have responsibilities. Adrian's voice cracked like a whip. Social obligations. You can't just alienate everyone. Why not? You do. The accusation hung between them. Adrian's face darkened. That's different. How? How is it different? Because I'm the Duke. I can afford to be cold, isolated, miserable. Selective, he finished icily. Lillian laughed, and it came out broken. You're not selective, Adrian. You're alone, and you've made me alone too. Something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or recognition. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. If you're lonely, that's not my concern. No, Lillian said quietly. I suppose it's not. She left him standing in the library, and this time she was the one who didn't look back. That night, alone in her chambers, Lillian made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this. Couldn't keep waiting for Adrian to change, for society to accept her, for her purpose to be fulfilled. Couldn't keep measuring her worth by whether she'd produced an heir or pleased a husband who didn't even see her as human. She had to save herself. Whatever that meant. Whatever it cost. The decision solidified over days, then weeks, taking shape like something inevitable and terrible. Lillian spent April in the gardens, hands in the soil, mind churning through possibilities that all led to the same impossible conclusion. She couldn't stay. Not like this. Not as a ghost haunting her own life, waiting for a man who would never see her to suddenly wake up and care. The gardens bloomed around her, tentative at first, then with gathering confidence. Early tulips pushed through dark earth. The rose bushes she'd pruned back to stumps produced new growth, tender and green. Life returning where there'd been only death. She could do the same. She had to. But leaving meant confronting truths she'd been avoiding. She had no money of her own. Everything came through Mrs. Hartwell, approved by Adrian. She had no family to return to. Her parents' estate had been seized in March. Her father fled to France, her mother living with distant cousins who'd made clear the arrangement was temporary. She had no skills beyond those taught to gentry daughters, useless accomplishments like watercolors and French. She had nothing, except one thing. The knowledge arrived on a morning in late April, delivered by Mary with shaking hands and tear-bright eyes. Your Grace, I think you should know. The village midwife said... The girl stopped, swallowed. She said you've been looking peaky, and you haven't asked for the monthly linens in some time. Lillian's teacup froze halfway to her lips. What? I didn't want to say anything, case I was wrong, but Mrs. Hartwell noticed too, and the cook said you've been off your food and... Mary. Lillian set down the cup carefully. Are you saying you think I'm with child? The maid nodded miserably. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I know it's not my place, but everyone's been talking, and I thought you should hear it from someone who cares about you. Lillian sat very still, doing calculations in her head. Her last courses had been February? Early March? She'd been so consumed with misery and garden work that she hadn't noticed the absence, the nausea she'd attributed to stress, the exhaustion to sleepless nights. But now that Mary said it, everything clicked into horrible, perfect place. Fetch the midwife, she said. Now, and tell no one. Mrs. Brennan arrived within the hour, a stout woman with capable hands and sharp eyes who'd delivered half the county's babies. She examined Lillian in her chambers, asked pointed questions about timing and symptoms, and delivered her verdict with professional neutrality. You're breeding, Your Grace, that 3 months along, near as I can tell. The word should have brought relief, joy even. This was what she'd been brought here for, the whole purpose of her existence in this house. Instead, Lillian felt the walls closing in. You're certain? As certain as I can be without more time passing. You'll start showing soon, another month or two. After Mrs. Brennan left, Lillian sat alone in her chambers and tried to process what this meant. An heir. Adrian would get what he wanted, the settlement would be paid. Her family's debts would be cleared. Too late for the estate, but her mother would be provided for. The contract would be fulfilled, and she would be trapped here forever. The thought sent panic clawing up her throat. She'd been planning escape, plotting survival, and now her own body had betrayed her. Because she couldn't leave now. Couldn't walk away from a child, her child, to be raised by a man who viewed love as weakness and emotion as failure. She pressed her hands to her still flat stomach and tried to feel something other than terror. A knock at the door made her jump. Your Grace? Mrs. Hartwell's voice. His Grace would like to see you in his study. Lillian's heart lurched. Now? He said it was urgent. She found Adrian standing at his desk, a letter in his hand, face carved from stone. Close the door, he said. She obeyed, pulse hammering. Adrian held up the letter. This arrived from Lady Ashford this morning. She's lodged a formal complaint with the county magistrate about your behavior, claims you threatened her, engaged in conduct unbecoming a duchess. Lillian's stomach dropped. That's a lie. I asked her to leave my garden after she insulted me. She's provided witnesses. Her lady's maid, apparently, who was waiting in the carriage, heard you shouting. I didn't shout. Well, someone heard something because now I have the magistrate asking pointed questions about my wife's mental stability. The accusation hit like a fist. My mental... Lady Ashford is suggesting you're unstable, hysterical. She's painted a picture of a woman unfit for her position. Adrian's voice was cold, controlled, but she could see fury beneath it. This is a disaster, Lillian. The scandal alone... I'm pregnant. The words came out flat, without ceremony. Adrian stopped mid-sentence, letter still in hand. What? I'm pregnant, 3 months. The midwife confirmed it this morning. Silence crashed down between them. Adrian's face went through a series of changes, shock, disbelief, something that might have been hope, before settling back into cold neutrality. You're certain? Mrs. Brennan doesn't make mistakes. He sat down slowly, like his legs had stopped working. 3 months. Yes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't know sooner. I wasn't... She stopped. It doesn't matter. Now you know. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and she couldn't read his expression at all. This changes things, he said finally. Does it? Of course it does. An heir, that's everything. The settlement will be paid. Your position is secured. My position, Lillian repeated numbly. You'll need to take better care of yourself. No more manual labor in the gardens. Mrs. Brennan should attend you regularly. We'll need to hire a nurse, prepare the nursery. Adrian. He looked up. Do you care? She asked. At all? Not about the heir, about the fact that there's a child. Your child. Our child. His jaw tightened. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Of course I care. This is important. Important isn't the same as caring. Adrian stood abruptly, the letter crumpling in his fist. I don't know what you want from me, Lillian. You knew what this marriage was. You agreed to the terms. Now you're fulfilling them. That should be enough. Should be, she said quietly. But it's not. He stared at her, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. Then what do you want? The question hung in the air between them, huge and unanswerable. Lillian looked at this man, her husband, the father of her child, this stranger, and realized she didn't know anymore. She'd wanted so many things when she married him. Safety, security. Maybe, in some foolish corner of her heart, love. Now she just wanted to survive. I want to matter, she said, not as a vessel, not as a name on a contract, as a person. Adrian's expression shuddered completely. I can't give you that. Can't or won't. Does it matter? The honesty of it was brutal. Lillian felt something in her chest finally, completely break. No, she said. I suppose it doesn't. She walked to the door, hand on the knob, then paused. I won't tell anyone about the baby. Not yet. Give me time to figure things out. Lillian, but she was already gone. Bob. That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her chambers, hands pressed to her stomach, mind racing through scenarios that all ended badly. She could stay. Raise the child in this cold house, watch Adrian mold their son or daughter into another emotionally stunted Blackthorn. Live out her days as the Duchess, who'd fulfilled her duty and nothing more. Or she could leave. The thought was insane. Impossible. A pregnant Duchess fleeing her husband would cause a scandal that would follow her forever. Society would crucify her. Her family, what remained of it, would disown her. She'd have nothing, no one, but she'd be free. The knock at her door came near midnight. Your Grace? Mrs. Hartwell's voice, urgent. You need to come. There's been an accident. Lillian's blood turned to ice. What kind of accident? His Grace, he was riding Phantom in the dark and the horse threw him. He's hurt. She ran. Down the stairs, through hallways, out to the stables where lanterns blazed and voices shouted. They'd brought Adrian into the tack room, laid him on a workbench cleared of equipment. Blood matted his hair. His face was gray. Dr. Whitmore, the local physician, hastily summoned, was examining his ribs. Cracked, at least 2 of them. Possible concussion. He's lucky he didn't break his neck. Adrian's eyes were closed, breathing shallow. Lillian pushed forward. Is he conscious? Drifting in and out, he took a nasty blow to the head. What happened? The head groom Tom answered, voice shaking. He came down near 11, demanded Phantom be saddled. I told him it wasn't safe riding in the dark, but he wouldn't listen. Horse spooked at something on the north road and threw him into a ditch. Lillian looked at Adrian's battered face and felt a complicated surge of emotion, anger, fear, something deeper she didn't want to name. Can he be moved? Not yet, Dr. Whitmore said. I need to set these ribs first. Make sure there's no internal bleeding. Send for me if his condition changes. Over the next hour, they stabilized him enough to transport to his chambers. It took 4 men to carry him up the stairs. Lillian followed, numb and afraid. They laid him in his bed, a room she'd never entered, severe and masculine, all dark wood and leather. Dr. Whitmore gave instructions to Mrs. Hartwell about cold compresses and dosing with laudanum if the pain got too severe. Then everyone left, and Lillian was alone with her unconscious husband. She sat in the chair beside his bed and watched him breathe. His face, in sleep, looked younger. The hard lines softened. She could see the boy he must have been before his father beat the tenderness out of him, before he learned that survival meant freezing every feeling until you couldn't remember how to thaw. You're an idiot, she whispered. Riding in the dark because of what? Pride? Anger. Because of her, probably. Their conversation had clearly driven him to something reckless. She reached out, hesitated, then touched his hand. His fingers were cold. I don't know what to do, she said to his unconscious form. I'm carrying your child, and I don't know if I can stay. That makes me a terrible person, doesn't it? A terrible mother already. No response. Just the sound of his breathing, labored and rough. You're going to hate me, she continued. When you wake up and I'm gone, you'll call me ungrateful, selfish, cruel, and maybe you're right. Maybe I am all those things. Her voice cracked. But I can't live as a ghost anymore. I can't raise a child in a house where love is treated like a disease. I won't. She sat with him through the night, keeping watch, trying to convince herself she was making the right choice. Dawn came gray and cold. Adrian's eyes flickered open near 6, focusing on her with difficulty. Lillian? His voice was rough, confused. Don't try to sit up. You have cracked ribs. What happened? Phantom threw you. You hit your head. He tried to move anyway and gasped in pain. Told you, Lillian said, but her voice was gentle. Dr. Whitmore says you need to stay in bed for at least a week. That's not... I have work. The estate will survive without you for a few days. Adrian's gaze sharpened despite the obvious pain. You stayed all night? Someone had to make sure you didn't die. Why? The question caught her off guard. Why what? Why do you care? After everything? Because you're my husband, Lillian said quietly. And despite everything, I don't want you dead. Adrian stared at her, something unreadable in his dark eyes. I'm sorry, he said suddenly. For what? For being a bastard. For treating you like... He stopped, jaw clenching. You deserved better. The apology was so unexpected, so completely unlike him, that Lillian didn't know how to respond. Are you sure you don't have a head injury? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Fairly certain, but if I do, at least I'm being honest for once. He closed his eyes again, exhausted. Don't leave, he murmured. Please, just stay. Lillian sat frozen, his words echoing in her head. Was he talking about the room or something bigger? But Adrian had already drifted back to sleep, face slack with pain and laudanum. She stayed. Over the next 3 days, she tended him. It started as duty, making sure he took his medicine, ate when Dr. Whitmore insisted, didn't try to get out of bed before he was ready. But somewhere in the hours of sitting beside him, reading aloud when he was awake, helping him drink water when the pain was too severe to move, something shifted. She saw him vulnerable for the first time, saw him frustrated by his own weakness, angry at needing help, embarrassed when she had to assist him with basic tasks, saw him finally as human. On the 4th day, he was well enough to sit up, though it clearly hurt. You don't have to keep doing this, he said as she brought him broth. Mrs. Hartwell can manage. I know. Then why? Because I want to. Adrian studied her face. The baby. Is everything... Fine. I'm fine. The baby's fine. Good. He paused. I've been thinking about what you said, about mattering. Lillian's pulse quickened. And? I don't know how to do this. Any of this. My father never... He stopped, frustrated. I don't have a model for what a marriage should be, or what a father should be. All I know is control and distance. That's honest, at least. I want to try, he said, the words clearly costing him. I don't know if I can change, but I want to try. For the child, and for... He met her eyes. For you. Lillian felt tears prick her eyes, unwanted and inconvenient. Why now? What changed? I almost died in that ditch, Adrian said quietly, and all I could think was that I'd wasted everything, every moment, every chance. I'd built walls so high I couldn't even see over them anymore. He reached for her hand, movement stiff and painful. I don't want to die alone, Lillian. I don't want my child to grow up afraid of me the way I was afraid of my father. I don't... His voice cracked. I don't want to keep being this person. The vulnerability was raw, real, terrifying. Lillian squeezed his hand. That's a start, she said softly. It's not enough, but it's a start. What would be enough? Time, effort, proof that you mean it. Adrian nodded slowly. Then that's what I'll give you. For a moment, Lillian let herself hope. Then reality crashed back, because wanting to change and actually changing were different things, and she'd spent 7 months watching this man choose coldness over connection at every turn. One moment of vulnerability didn't erase that. One promise didn't rebuild trust. She pulled her hand back gently. Rest, she said. We can talk more when you're stronger. She left him sitting in his bed, something like disappointment crossing his face. Out in the hallway, she leaned against the wall and tried to catch her breath. She'd been ready to leave, had been planning it piece by piece, and now he was offering exactly what she'd wanted, a chance, however small, at something real. But could she trust it? Could she risk everything on the hope that he meant what he said? The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 days later, a letter arrived. Mrs. Hartwell brought it to Lillian while she was in the gardens, supervising the planting of summer bulbs. Your Grace, this came for you, from London. Lillian wiped her hands and took the envelope. The seal was unfamiliar, the handwriting precise and legal. She opened it standing there in the dirt, sunlight warm on her shoulders. The letter was from a solicitor. Her father was dead. Killed in a duel in France over gambling debts, his body returned to England for burial. The letter was brief, professional, devastating in its brevity. Lillian read it twice, then a third time, waiting to feel something. Grief. Anger. Relief. Nothing came. Just a hollow numbness and the distant thought that her father had died exactly as he'd lived, recklessly, selfishly, leaving others to clean up his mess. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Hartwell's voice was gentle. "Is it bad news?" "My father is dead." The housekeeper's face softened. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." "Are you?" The question came out sharper than intended. Mrs. Hartwell didn't flinch. "Death is always a loss, Your Grace, even complicated ones." Lillian folded the letter carefully. "I need to tell my mother. And Adrian." She found Adrian in his study. He'd insisted on returning to work despite Dr. Whitmore's protests. He looked up when she entered, face still pale but determined. "Lillian, I wasn't expecting while my father is dead." The words came out flat. Adrian stood slowly, wincing. "What happened?" She handed him the letter. He read it in silence, jaw tightening. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Everyone keeps saying that." "What do you need?" The question surprised her. "I don't know. To see my mother, I suppose. To arrange for whatever needs arranging." Adrian moved to his desk, pulling out writing paper. "I'll send word to your mother. She can come here or we can go to her, whichever she prefers. I'll cover all funeral expenses." He paused. "And I'll release the settlement funds, all of them, immediately." Lillian stared at him. "Why?" "Because you need them. Because it's the right thing to do." His gaze was steady. "Because I'm trying to be the man you deserve." Something in Lillian's chest twisted painfully. "The man I deserve would have done this months ago." "I know," Adrian said quietly. "I know I'm too late for a lot of things, but I'm here now. Let me help." Lillian wanted to say yes, wanted to believe him, wanted to let this small kindness be the beginning of something better, but she'd been disappointed too many times. "I need to think," she said, "about everything. My father's death, the baby, this marriage. I need time to think." "Take all the time you need." She turned to leave. "Lillian?" She paused at the door. "I meant what I said the other day. I want to try." "I know," she said softly, "but wanting isn't enough." Her mother arrived 3 days later, diminished by grief and poverty, wearing black that had seen better years. They held the funeral at the local church, a sparse affair attended by a handful of distant relatives and county acquaintances who came more from obligation than affection. Adrian stood beside Lillian throughout, a silent presence that felt both supportive and suffocating. After, when everyone had departed, Lillian and her mother sat in the small sitting room. "He was a difficult man," her mother said quietly, "but he was still your father." "He sold me," Lillian replied, voice hollow, "to pay his debts. That's what fathers do, apparently." "Lillian, I'm not angry anymore, Mama. I'm just tired." Her mother reached across and took her hand. "Are you happy here?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Lillian didn't know how to answer. "I don't know what happiness looks like anymore." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Her mother studied her face. "You're with child." Lillian's hand went instinctively to her stomach. "How did you—" "I'm your mother. I know." She squeezed Lillian's fingers. "Does he treat you well?" "He's trying to, recently." "Recently isn't always. What about before?" Lillian looked away. "Before was difficult." "Do you want to leave him?" The question hung in the air, terrifying in its simplicity. "It doesn't matter what I want. I'm pregnant. I'm a duchess. There's no leaving." "There's always leaving," her mother said softly, "if you're brave enough." "And go where? Do what?" "I have nothing, Mama. No money, no skills, no—" "You have the settlement." Her mother's voice was firm. "Adrian released the funds this morning. The solicitor confirmed it. That money is yours, Lillian. Not mine, not your father's creditors. Yours." Lillian's breath caught. "How much?" enough to live independently, modestly, but independently. For years, if you're careful. The information hit like a thunderbolt. She had money, real money, enough to leave, enough to survive. The cage door had just swung open. "What are you saying?" Lillian whispered. "I'm saying you have a choice." Her mother's eyes were fierce. "For the first time in your life, you have a real choice. You can stay and hope Adrian becomes the man he promises to be. Or you can leave and build a life on your own terms. With a baby, unmarried for all intents, scandal following me everywhere. Yes, all of that. It won't be easy, but it will be yours." Lillian sat very still, the weight of possibility crushing and liberating at once. "I don't know if I'm that brave." "You're braver than you think." Her mother stood, smoothing her skirts. "Whatever you decide, I support you. Completely." After her mother retired for the evening, Lillian walked the gardens in the fading light. The flowers she'd planted were blooming now, roses unfurling, lavender beginning to purple, the whole space transforming from ruin to beauty. She'd done this, taken something dead and made it live. Could she do the same for herself? Adrian found her by the fountain as the last light drained from the sky. "Your mother told me she's returning to her cousins tomorrow." "Yes." He moved closer, movements still careful. "I've been thinking. About the baby. About us. I want to propose something." Lillian's heart hammered. "What?" "Give me 6 months. 6 months to prove I can be different. To prove this marriage can be more than what it's been." His voice was steady, determined. "If at the end of that time you still want to leave, I won't stop you. I'll provide for you and the child, support whatever story we need to tell society. But give me a chance." Lillian stared at him. 6 months. "Yes. And if you fail? If you go back to being how you were? Then you'll know I meant well but couldn't change, and you'll leave with my blessing." It was a better offer than she'd ever expected, more generous, more honest. But 6 months of hoping only to be disappointed again? 6 months of rebuilding trust that might shatter the moment things got difficult? Could she survive that? "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course." Adrian turned to go, then stopped. "Lillian, whatever you decide, you should know. I'm grateful for everything you've done. The gardens, taking care of me when I was hurt, staying when you had every reason to run. You deserved better from the start. I know that now." He walked away, leaving her alone with the roses and the impossible decision. That night, Lillian lay in bed and made lists in her head. Reasons to stay. The baby. Adrian's promises. The slim chance this could work. The scandal of leaving. Reasons to go. Self-preservation. Freedom. The certainty that Adrian would fail eventually because people didn't really change. The list balanced perfectly, offering no clarity. Near dawn, exhausted and terrified, she made her choice. She would leave. Not immediately, not dramatically, but she would plan, carefully and methodically. Would set aside money, arrange transportation, secure a place to stay, would give Adrian his 6 months, not because she believed he'd change, but because she needed time to build her escape route. And when she left, she'd take her child and never look back. The decision settled over her like armor. She was done waiting for rescue, done hoping for miracles. She would save herself. The morning her mother departed, Lillian watched the carriage disappear down the drive and felt utterly alone. She pressed a hand to her stomach where the baby grew and whispered a promise. "I will protect you, no matter what it costs. No matter what I have to do, you will not grow up in a cage." She turned back toward the house, this beautiful, cold prison, and began to plan her war. But she didn't see Adrian watching from his study window, face unreadable, hands clenched into fists. Or the letter that had arrived that morning from Lady Ashford, detailing every rumor circulating about the Duchess's strange behavior, her isolation, her suspected instability. Or the magistrate's follow-up inquiry, now citing multiple witnesses claiming Lillian was unfit. The trap was closing, and Lillian had no idea that by choosing to leave, she'd just triggered the fight of her life. The letter from the magistrate arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by special courier while Lillian was arranging dried lavender in the morning room. Mrs. Hartwell brought it in, face carefully neutral, but Lillian caught the worry in her eyes. "This came for you, Your Grace. The courier said it required your immediate attention." Lillian broke the seal with unsteady hands. The language was formal, bureaucratic, cold. She had to read it twice before the meaning sank in. "Concerns raised regarding your fitness as Duchess of Greymont. Multiple witnesses attesting to erratic behavior, social impropriety, and possible mental instability. Formal inquiry to be conducted. You are required to appear before the county magistrate on May 15th. The lavender slipped from her fingers, scattering across the floor. "Your Grace," Mrs. Hartwell moved forward quickly. "What is it?" Lillian's voice came out strange, distant. "They're questioning my sanity." "Who is?" "Lady Ashford, the magistrate. Everyone, apparently." Her hands shook as she read the list of accusations. Threatening a peer of the realm, engaging in manual labor inappropriate to her station, isolating herself from society, displaying emotional volatility, each one carefully worded to sound damning while being just true enough to stick. "This is insane," she whispered. "I haven't done anything wrong." "Of course you haven't, ma'am. But they're going to use this against me. To what? Declare me incompetent? Take away my rights?" Mrs. Hartwell's silence was answer enough. Lillian stood abruptly, the room tilting. "I need to find Adrian." She found him in the stables, examining Phantom's injured leg with the head groom. He looked up when she approached, concern flashing across his face. "Lillian, you're pale." She shoved the letter at him. He read it standing there in the stable yard, his expression darkening with each line. "When did this arrive?" "Just now." Adrian folded the letter with deliberate precision, jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "This is Ashford's doing, all of it." "Can she do this? Can she actually?" "She can make things very difficult." Adrian's voice was tight with controlled fury. "If the magistrate believes there's cause for concern, he can order a formal evaluation. Bring in physicians to examine you, question servants, neighbors. They'll tear me apart. Yes." The bluntness of it was almost refreshing. "What do I do?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. "You fight." "How, I'm a woman with no power, no connections of my own. You're the Duchess of Greymont," Adrian interrupted, "and you have me." The words should have brought comfort. Instead, they highlighted exactly what she'd been planning to escape: total dependence on a man who'd already proven unreliable. "Adrian, I mean it." He stepped closer. "I won't let them destroy you. Not for following your conscience. Not for having the audacity to live your own life." Something in his voice made her pause. "Why now? Why do you suddenly care?" "Because I've been a coward," Adrian said flatly. "I let them insult you to your face, dismissed your concerns, treated you like property. And now they think they can destroy you because I gave them permission by my own silence." He turned to Tom. "Saddle Eclipse. I'm writing to the magistrate's office." "Your Grace, your ribs. I don't care about my ribs." Lillian grabbed his arm. "Wait, what are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to." But Adrian's confrontation with the magistrate accomplished nothing. He returned 3 hours later, furious and frustrated, to find Lillian pacing the library. "He won't withdraw it," Adrian said without preamble. "Says there are too many complaints on record. Claims he has a duty to investigate. So I have to appear." "Yes, May 15th, 2 weeks from now." Lillian sank into a chair. "They're going to paint me as mad, unfit, take away everything. Not if we fight back." "How? What witnesses do I have? Mary, the garden boys, against Lady Ashford and half the county?" Adrian paced the room, thinking. "We need to change the narrative. Show them you're not unstable. You're strong, competent, that everything you've done has been purposeful and productive." "The gardens," Lillian said suddenly. "The restoration project. I have documentation. My mother-in-law's journals, the plans I drew up, the accounts I kept. That's a start. What else? The household accounts. I've been reviewing them, finding savings. Mrs. Hartwell can attest to that. Adrian stopped pacing. The tenants. You visited them during the winter, didn't you? When that family in the South Cottages was ill? Lillian had almost forgotten. Mrs. Davies and her children. They had influenza. I brought soup and medicine. That's not the action of an unstable woman. That's charity, duty. His eyes gleamed. We build a counter case. Show that every erratic behavior was actually responsibility. Will it work? I don't know, but it's better than going in defenseless. Over the next week, they prepared. Adrian summoned tenants who could speak to Lillian's character. Mrs. Hartwell compiled household records showing improved efficiency under Lillian's management. Dr. Whitmore agreed to provide a medical assessment of her mental state. Lillian threw herself into the preparation with desperate energy, trying not to think about what failure would mean. But the strain was showing. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The baby moved inside her now, small flutters that should have brought joy but only reminded her of what was at stake. One evening, she found herself in the gardens at twilight, kneeling in the dirt despite Adrian's protests about her condition, pulling weeds with shaking hands. She didn't hear him approach until he spoke. You're going to exhaust yourself. Lillian didn't look up. I need to keep moving. If I stop, I'll... Her voice cracked. I can't stop. Adrian knelt beside her, awkward in his formal clothes, still favoring his injured ribs. Give me those. He took the shears from her hands and began cutting back a rosebush, movements unpracticed but determined. They worked in silence as the light faded, two people who'd been strangers finally sharing space without walls between them. I'm sorry, Adrian said finally, for all of it, for bringing you here and then abandoning you, for letting them hurt you. You've apologized before. I know, but I need you to understand. He stopped, frustrated. I don't know how to be what you need. My father beat anything soft out of me before I was 12. I learned that showing emotion meant showing weakness, that caring about anything gave people power over you. He looked at her, and in the gathering darkness, his face was vulnerable. But I'm learning, slowly, that shutting everything out doesn't protect you, it just makes you alone. Lillian's throat tightened. What changed, really? Almost dying helped, but mostly, he gestured to the gardens. Watching you. You took something dead and brought it back to life through sheer stubbornness. I kept thinking, if she can do that with these gardens, maybe there's hope for me too. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Lillian reached out, hesitated, then took his hand. It's going to take more than hope. I know. And I might still leave after all this is over. I haven't decided. Adrian's hand tightened on hers. I know that too. But right now, I'm just asking you to let me fight for you. Can you do that? Lillian looked at this man, her husband, her warden, her unlikely ally, and made a choice. Yes. The day of the hearing arrived gray and threatening rain. Lillian dressed carefully in deep blue silk, hair pinned severely, every inch the proper duchess. Mary's hands shook while fastening the buttons. You'll do brilliantly, ma'am. I know it. Thank you, Mary. Adrian was waiting in the entrance hall, formal in black, expression carved from stone. But when he took her arm, his grip was steady. Ready? No. Good. Neither am I. The magistrate's office was in town, a stern building of gray stone that smelled of old paper and furniture polish. The waiting room was crowded, Lady Ashford holding court in one corner, surrounded by supporters. She looked up when Lillian entered, smile sharp as glass. Duchess, how brave of you to come. Lillian ignored her. They were called into the hearing room, a paneled space with a long table where the magistrate sat flanked by two clerks. Chairs had been arranged in rows, already filling with spectators. This was theater, Lillian realized. Public humiliation dressed as legal proceeding. The magistrate, Mr. Thornbury, was a portly man with white hair and shrewd eyes. Your Grace, he addressed Lillian, thank you for appearing. This inquiry has been called to address certain concerns regarding your fitness to fulfill the duties of your station. I understand, Lillian said, voice steady despite her hammering heart. Lady Ashford has filed a formal complaint. We'll hear from her first. Lady Ashford stood, playing her role perfectly. She recounted the garden incident with embellishments. Lillian's voice raised to a scream, her appearance wild and unkempt, her words threatening violence. I feared for my safety, Lady Ashford said, hand pressed to her chest. The poor girl seemed completely unhinged. Murmurs rippled through the room. Next came Lady Ashford's maid, who corroborated the story with wide, frightened eyes. Then Lord Ashford, pompous and regretful. Such a shame. Poor Blackthorn, saddled with an unsuitable wife. One hates to interfere in a man's marriage, but when public safety is concerned, Adrian stood abruptly. That's enough. Mr. Thornberry frowned. Your Grace, you'll have opportunity to speak. I'm speaking now. Adrian's voice cut like a blade. This entire proceeding is a farce. Lady Ashford is weaponizing your office to punish my wife for having the audacity to defend herself against petty cruelty. Your Grace, I must insist. My wife asked Lady Ashford to leave her private gardens after being insulted. That's not instability, that's self-respect. Something this county could use more of. The room went silent. Lady Ashford's face flushed red. How dare you? No, Adrian said, turning to face her directly. How dare you? You've made a career of belittling anyone you consider beneath you, my wife included. She's committed no crime except refusing to tolerate your abuse. Mr. Thornberry, Lady Ashford sputtered, this is outrageous. But the magistrate was watching Adrian with new interest. You're defending your wife's actions? Absolutely. And I have witnesses who will testify to her character. Over the next hour, the tide began to turn. Mrs. Davies testified, tearful and grateful, about Lillian bringing food and medicine when her children were ill. Mrs. Hartwell presented household accounts showing Lillian's competent management. Dr. Whitmore declared her perfectly sound of mind and body. Tom the groom spoke about her kindness to the stable boys. Even Mary took the stand, voice shaking but determined, describing a mistress who was the kindest, bravest lady I've ever known. With each testimony, Lady Ashford's position weakened. Finally, Adrian stood. If I may address the court directly. Mr. Thornberry nodded. Adrian looked out at the assembled crowd, then at Lillian. My wife came to Blackthorn Manor 7 months ago. I treated her abominably. I was cold, distant, dismissive of her needs and feelings. I married her for practical reasons and made no secret of it. Lillian's breath caught. What was he doing? She could have retreated into self-pity, could have become the bitter, resentful woman society seems to expect. Instead, she chose to create beauty, to tend to things that were broken, including me. His voice roughened. She restored gardens that had been dead for 15 years. She cared for tenants I'd neglected. She managed a household with grace despite being isolated and lonely. And when I was injured, she stayed by my bedside for 3 days, even though I'd given her no reason to care whether I lived or died. He turned to Lady Ashford. You call her unstable because she won't tolerate cruelty. I call her strong. You call her unsuitable because she works with her own hands. I call her capable. You want her declared incompetent because she threatens your sense of superiority. Your Grace, this is highly irregular, Mr. Thornberry began. I'm not finished. Adrian's voice was steel. My wife is carrying my child, the next Duke or Duchess of Greymont. If this court declares her unfit, you're not just attacking her, you're attacking my family, my line, my legacy. And I will fight that with every resource I possess. The threat was clear and unmistakable. The room erupted in whispers. Mr. Thornberry called for order, then looked at Lillian. Your Grace, do you wish to speak on your own behalf? Lillian stood, legs trembling. Yes. Every eye turned to her. Lady Ashford is right about one thing, she said quietly. I am different from what you expected. I don't spend my days paying meaningless social calls. I don't pretend to care about gossip and scandal. I work in my gardens because it's the only place I've found peace in a world that treats women like decorative furniture. Her voice grew stronger. You want me to apologize for being strong? For refusing to break? I won't. You want me to declare myself incompetent because I wouldn't tolerate being mocked in my own home? I won't do that either. She looked directly at Lady Ashford. You've spent this entire hearing trying to destroy me because I wouldn't bow, because I wouldn't play the game the way you wanted. But I'm done playing anyone's games. I'm the Duchess of Greymont. I will raise my child, manage my household, and live my life according to my own conscience. And if that makes me unsuitable in your eyes, then so be it. She sat down, heart racing. The silence was absolute. Mr. Thornberry cleared his throat. This court will recess to consider the evidence. We'll reconvene in 1 hour. They waited in a small anteroom. Adrian paced while Lillian sat, trying to keep her breathing steady. That was extraordinary, Beth, he said finally. It was probably stupid. I couldn't sit there and let her destroy me without fighting back. That's not stupid. That's brave. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. I should have said that months ago, should have defended you from the start. But I'm saying it now. Lillian felt tears prick her eyes. If they rule against me, they won't. But if they do, then we'll appeal. We'll fight it all the way to the House of Lords if we have to. I won't let them take you from me. The possessiveness should have bothered her. Instead, it felt like safety. Why? Why does it matter so much now? Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, for maybe the first time since their wedding. Because I love you. The words landed like a thunderclap. You, what? I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when I watched you restore those gardens. Maybe when you stood up to Lady Ashford. Maybe it's been happening slowly this whole time, and I was too stupid to notice. His hands tightened on hers. I love your strength, your stubbornness, your refusal to be broken. I love that you chose life and beauty in a house full of death and coldness. I love that you stayed when you should have run, and I love our child already because it's part of you. Lillian couldn't breathe. You're saying this now? In the middle of a hearing that could destroy both of us? I'm saying it now because I might not get another chance, and you deserve to know. Before she could respond, the door opened. The magistrate is ready. They returned to the hearing room in silence, Lillian's mind spinning. Mr. Thornberry stood. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, this court finds no grounds to support the allegations against the Duchess of Greymont. Relief crashed through Lillian like a wave. The accusations appear to stem from personal animosity rather than legitimate concern. The Duchess has demonstrated sound judgment, responsible stewardship, and admirable character. This inquiry is dismissed. He turned to Lady Ashford, whose face had gone white. Furthermore, I strongly advise Lady Ashford to consider the gravity of making false accusations against a peer. Such behavior is unbecoming and will not be tolerated in this county. Lady Ashford stood abruptly and swept from the room, face burning with humiliation. Around them, the crowd erupted into whispers. Adrian pulled Lillian to her feet and did something he'd never done in public. He embraced her. It's over, he whispered. You won. Lillian sagged against him, exhaustion and relief mixing into something that felt dangerously close to hope. The carriage ride home was quiet. They sat side by side, not touching, both processing what had happened. Finally, Lillian spoke. Did you mean it? What you said in the anteroom? Every word. I don't know if I can believe you. Adrian turned to face her. I know, I've given you no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to try. For how long? As long as it takes. 6 months? 6 years? 60 years? However long you need to see that I'm serious. Lillian looked at him. This man who'd hurt her, ignored her, finally fought for her. I'm still afraid, she admitted. Of what? That you'll go back to being who you were. That this is temporary. That I'll let myself hope and you'll break me all over again. Adrian reached for her hand, movements careful. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. I probably will. But I can promise I'll keep trying, that I won't give up on us. Us, Lillian repeated. There's an us now? There's always been an us. I was just too blind to see it. The carriage pulled up to the manor. Adrian helped her down, and for the first time it felt like a real gesture instead of a formality. Inside, the staff had gathered. Clearly, they'd heard the news. Mrs. Hartwell was beaming. "Well done, Your Grace, both of you." Mary was crying openly. Even the usually stoic Tom looked pleased. Lillian felt something shift in her chest. These people, they cared. They'd always cared. She'd just been too focused on Adrian's coldness to notice. "Thank you," she said, voice thick. "All of you. For testifying, for supporting me, for making this place a home." That evening, Adrian came to her chambers. Not for the mechanical ritual they'd established. Just to talk. He sat in the chair by her fire while she curled in the window seat, watching the gardens in the twilight. "I spoke to my solicitor today, he said, about the settlement funds. They're being released fully. Your mother will be provided for. Permanently." Lillian turned to stare at him. "Adrian, it's what should have been done from the start. Your family's financial ruin wasn't your fault. You shouldn't be punished for it." That's incredibly generous. It's decent. There's a difference." He stood, moving to the window beside her. "I also want you to know the offer still stands. 6 months, or however long you need, to decide if you want to stay. I won't trap you here. If you choose to leave, I'll support you, financially, socially, whatever you need." Lillian's throat tightened. "You'd let me go? Even now?" "I'd hate it, but yes. Because keeping you prisoner isn't love. It's just another form of the cage you've been living in." She looked up at him, this man who'd finally started to understand. "What if I said I wanted to stay?" Adrian's breath caught. "Do you?" "I don't know yet," Lillian admitted. It was something, seeing you fight for me, hearing what you said. But I need time to trust it." "Take all the time you need." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth. I see you now. Really see you. Not as a vessel or a contract. As Lillian. The woman who saved my gardens and maybe, if I'm lucky, might save me too." He left before she could respond. Lillian sat in the darkening room, one hand on her growing belly, and let herself feel something she'd thought was dead. Hope. Fragile, terrifying hope that maybe, just maybe, the cage was finally opening, and she was strong enough to decide whether to stay or fly. The hope was fragile at first, like new growth after frost, present but vulnerable, liable to die at the first sign of cold. Lillian carried it carefully through the following days, watching Adrian for signs that his transformation was temporary, that the man who'd defended her so fiercely would revert to the distant duke who'd treated her like property. But he didn't. Small things changed first. He started taking breakfast with her instead of in his study, asked about her day, listened to her answers like they mattered. When she worked in the gardens, despite his protests about her condition, he'd join her in the evenings, reading aloud from agricultural journals while she sketched plans for autumn planting. They talked, really talked, about his childhood, her fears, the baby growing between them. "I'm terrified," she admitted one night, hands on her swelling belly. "Of being a mother, of doing it wrong." "Join the club," Adrian said. "I'm terrified of being a father, of becoming my father." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're asking the question he never did." It wasn't perfect. They still argued about her refusing to rest enough, about his tendency to retreat into work when emotions got overwhelming, about 100 small incompatibilities that marriage magnified. But they were trying. And trying, Lillian was learning, mattered more than perfection. June arrived with heat that made the manor feel less like a prison and more like a refuge. The gardens exploded into full bloom, roses rioting over arbors, lavender humming with bees, the fountain Adrian had secretly had repaired now bubbling with clear water. Lillian spent hours there, belly round now, moving slower but still determined. The village women who'd once whispered about her incompetence now nodded respectfully when she passed. Word of the hearing had spread, and with it, a grudging admiration. The Duchess who'd stood up to Lady Ashford, who'd refused to break. She was becoming someone new, or maybe just becoming herself. "You need to rest more," Adrian said, finding her deadheading roses in the afternoon heat. Dr. Whitmore says a lot of things." "Lillian," She looked up at him, this man who'd gone from stranger to adversary to something she didn't have a name for yet, and made a decision. "I'm staying." Adrian went very still. "What?" "I'm staying. Not because I have to, not because there's nowhere else to go, but because I want to." She set down the shears and moved closer, taking his hands. "You've spent 3 months proving you meant what you said. Showing up, changing, fighting for us. That's enough. It's more than enough." Adrian's throat worked. "You're sure?" "No," Lillian said honestly. "I'm terrified, but I'm choosing to trust you anyway. To trust this. To build something real instead of running from something broken." Adrian pulled her close, carefully, mindful of her belly, and pressed his forehead to hers. "I won't let you down." "You will sometimes. I'll let you down too. That's marriage." "Then we'll figure it out." "Yes," Lillian said softly. "We will." That night, Adrian came to her chambers with a small wooden box. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet set with moonstones. "I want you to have it." Lillian touched the cool metal reverently. "Adrian, I can't." "You can. She would have wanted you to." He fastened it around her wrist. "She would have liked you, your strength, your stubbornness, your refusal to let this place destroy you." "Tell me about her," Lillian said. "Really tell me." So he did. They sat together in the firelight while Adrian talked about his mother, her kindness, her quiet rebellion, the way she'd created beauty in the margins of a brutal marriage, how she'd died when he was 15, worn down by years of his father's cruelty. "I sealed the gardens because I was angry," Adrian admitted, "angry at him for breaking her, angry at her for not fighting back, angry at myself for not being able to save her." "You were a child." "I know, but knowing and feeling are different things." Lillian squeezed his hand. "She'd be proud of you, of what you're becoming." "I hope so." They sat in comfortable silence until Adrian spoke again. "I want to do something, for the estate, for the tenants, something that matters." "Like what?" "I've been thinking about the school in the village. It's falling apart. Half the children don't attend because their families need them working. What if we funded it properly, hired better teachers, made it free for everyone?" Lillian stared at him. "That would cost—" "I have money. More than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why not use it for something good?" "Your father would have hated that." "Good," Adrian said fiercely. "Let him spin in his grave. I'm done living according to his rules." Lillian felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Then let's do it." The school project consumed them through July and into August. Adrian threw himself into the planning with the same intensity he'd once reserved for isolation, meeting with architects, interviewing teachers, reviewing curricula. Lillian worked alongside him, designing gardens for the school grounds, organizing donations from county families who suddenly found it fashionable to support the Duchess's charitable work. The transformation was remarkable. Families who'd whispered about her incompetence now praised her vision. Women who'd mocked her for gardening now asked for advice on their own estates. Even Lady Ashford, apparently chastened by her public humiliation, kept her distance. But it was the tenants' response that meant the most. They came to the manor in small groups, farmers, laborers, servants, offering help with construction, donating materials they could barely spare, expressing gratitude in rough, honest words. "You're giving our children a chance, Mrs.," Davies said, tears in her eyes. "That's more than any duke's ever done." Lillian, belly enormous now, felt the baby kick as if in agreement. The school opened on a brilliant September morning, 2 weeks before Lillian's due date. The building was modest but solid, white stone and wide windows, surrounded by gardens that would bloom come spring. Inside, desks waited for students, books lined shelves, and a portrait of Adrian's mother hung in the entrance hall. "She started this," Adrian had said when Lillian questioned the choice. "In her gardens, teaching me that beauty and learning mattered. This is her legacy too." The dedication ceremony drew half the county. Lord Ashford gave a pompous speech. The vicar blessed the building. Children ran through the gardens, laughing. And when Adrian stood to speak, Lillian saw something she'd never expected: genuine emotion on his face. My father believes strength came from control, Adrian said, voice carrying across the crowd. From keeping people small and afraid. I believed that too, for a long time. He looked at Lillian. My wife taught me differently. She showed me that real strength is choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier, building when destroying requires less effort, caring when indifference is safer. Lillian's eyes burned. This school represents a different kind of legacy, one built on hope instead of fear, on opportunity instead of oppression. I hope it stands for generations, and I hope every child who walks through these doors knows they matter, that they're seen, that they have value beyond what they can produce or provide. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, as they walked through the gardens, Lillian felt a sharp pain low in her belly. She gasped. Adrian turned immediately. What's wrong? Nothing, just another pain, stronger. Oh. Is it the baby? I think so. Adrian's face went white. Now? Here? Babies don't wait for convenient timing. We need Dr. Whitmore and Mrs. Brennan and Adrian. Lillian gripped his arm as another contraction hit. Breathe. I'm breathing. Then stop panicking and get me home. The ride back to the manor felt eternal. Lillian gripped Adrian's hand through each contraction, watching him struggle between terror and determination. You're going to be fine, he kept saying. Both of you. You're strong. You can do this. I know, Lillian said through gritted teeth. Keep reminding me anyway. Mrs. Brennan met them at the manor, calm and efficient. Right on time. Let's get you upstairs, Your Grace. The next hours blurred into pain and effort, and Mary's steady presence and Mrs. Brennan's calm instructions. Adrian paced outside the door, refusing to leave despite Mrs. Hartwell's suggestions that he wait downstairs like proper dukes did. Near midnight, Lillian's control finally broke. I can't, she sobbed. It's too much. I can't. Yes, you can, Mrs. Brennan said firmly. You've survived worse than this. Now push. And she did. One final, agonizing effort. Then a baby's wail split the air, furious and alive and perfect. It's a girl, Mrs. Brennan said, tears in her eyes. A healthy, beautiful girl. They placed the baby on Lillian's chest, tiny and red-faced and screaming her outrage at being born. Lillian looked down at this impossible creature, this life she and Adrian had created, and felt something crack open inside her. Love, pure and overwhelming and terrifying. She's perfect, Lillian whispered. The door burst open. Adrian stood in the doorway, face wild. Are you? We're fine. Come meet your daughter. He approached slowly, like he was afraid to break something. When he looked down at the baby, his expression transformed. All the coldness, the distance, the careful control melting away. She's so small. She won't be for long. Adrian touched one tiny fist with his finger. The baby grabbed on, grip surprisingly strong. What should we name her? Lillian asked. Adrian looked at the portrait on the wall. His mother, painted in her youth, smiling in a garden. Catherine, he said, after my mother, if you agree. Catherine, Lillian repeated. It's perfect. They sat together as dawn broke, two people who'd started as strangers, survived as adversaries, and somehow found their way to family. The weeks after Catherine's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Lillian had expected motherhood to be difficult, but she hadn't anticipated the ferocity of it. The way every cry felt like an emergency, the exhaustion that made thinking difficult, the moment-to-moment terror that she was doing everything wrong. But she also hadn't anticipated the joy. Catherine's first smile, the weight of her sleeping on Lillian's chest, the way Adrian's whole face softened when he held his daughter. He was a revelation as a father, tentative at first, terrified of his own capacity for damage, but determined to be different. He woke for night feedings, walked the floors when Catherine fussed, sang lullabies in a surprisingly decent voice. Where did you learn that song? Lillian asked one night, watching him sway with the baby. My mother, before my father forbade it. Sing it again. So he did, voice rough with emotion, while Lillian watched this man, her husband, Catherine's father, finally become who he was meant to be. October brought the first frost and a letter from her mother. My dearest Lillian, words cannot express my gratitude for Adrian's generosity. The settlement has changed everything. I've secured a small house in Bath and am, for the first time in decades, free from the terror of creditors. But more than that, I'm proud of you. You took an impossible situation and forged something beautiful. You chose strength over surrender. You saved yourself, and in doing so, you saved your marriage. I cannot wait to meet my granddaughter. Send word when you're ready for visitors. With all my love, Mother Lillian folded the letter carefully, tears in her eyes. Good news? Adrian asked, Catherine asleep on his shoulder. My mother. She's happy. Safe. Good. Lillian looked at him. This man who'd once refused to help her family, who'd called compassion weakness, who'd learned to choose kindness. Thank you for taking care of her. She's family. Of course I did. The simplicity of it made her throat tight. We should invite her for Christmas. Let her meet Catherine. I'll write to her tomorrow. That night, after Catherine was settled in her cradle, Adrian pulled Lillian into his arms. I never thanked you, he said. For what? For not giving up. On me. On us. On this life. You had every reason to leave, but you stayed and fought. You made me want to be better. Lillian leaned back to look at him. I didn't do it alone. You met me halfway. Barely. You did the heavy lifting. Then we'll take turns. That's marriage. Adrian kissed her, tender and unhurried, nothing like those early mechanical encounters. I love you, he said, in case I don't say it enough. You say it plenty, but I don't mind hearing it again. I love you, and our fierce little girl, and the life we're building, even though it's messy and imperfect and nothing like what you planned, especially because of that. Christmas at Blackthorn Manor was different that year. Lillian's mother arrived, frail but smiling, immediately besotted with Catherine. They decorated with evergreen boughs and holly, filled the house with the smell of baking, invited tenants for wassail and singing. The cold halls grew warm, the silent rooms filled with laughter. On Christmas Eve, Adrian found Lillian in the gardens, wrapped in furs. Catherine bundled against her chest. You'll freeze out here. Just for a moment, I wanted to see them. The garden slept under frost, but even in winter they were beautiful. The structure she'd created, the curved paths, the terraced beds, the restored fountain, promised renewal come spring. They're lovely, Adrian said, even now. Everything has seasons, even marriages. What season are we in? Lillian considered. Spring, maybe. New growth. Still fragile, but full of possibility. Adrian wrapped his arms around them both. I'll take it. They stood together in the gathering darkness, their breath misting in the cold air. Do you regret it? Adrian asked suddenly. Marrying me? Everything you went through? Lillian thought about it honestly. The loneliness, the humiliation, the months of despair. Then she thought about now, the man beside her, the baby in her arms, the life they'd fought for. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. I wish it had been easier. I wish you'd been ready sooner, but I don't regret where we ended up. Even though I was terrible to you? You were. And I'll probably remind you of it occasionally when you're being stubborn. Adrian laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and warm. Fair enough. Catherine stirred, making small sounds. We should go in, Lillian said, before she gets cold. But they lingered another moment, reluctant to break the spell. Inside, the manor glowed with candlelight. Her mother sat by the fire, knitting. Mrs. Hartwell directed servants arranging a feast. Mary played with ribbon decorations, laughing at something Tom had said. Home, Lillian thought. This had finally become home. Spring came again, as it always did. The gardens bloomed more spectacularly than ever, roses cascading, lavender perfuming the air, the fountain surrounded by Catherine's unsteady, toddling steps. The school thrived. 3 teachers now, 40 students, plans to expand. Adrian's reputation transformed. No longer the cold, distant duke, but a fair landlord, generous patron, devoted father. And Lillian, She became the Duchess she'd never imagined being. Not decorative, not silent, but strong. Capable. Seen. On their second anniversary, Adrian took her back to the chapel where they'd married. "I want to do this again," he said. "We're already married." "I know, but that wedding was a transaction. I want to marry you again, for real this time, with love instead of duty." So they did. Just the two of them, Catherine babbling in Lillian's arms, the vicar bemused but willing. Adrian spoke his vows with tears in his eyes. "I, Adrian, take you, Lillian, to be my wife. Not because I need an heir or an alliance, but because I love you. Because you saved me when I didn't deserve saving. Because you taught me that strength isn't control. It's choosing to be vulnerable anyway." Lillian's own vows came through tears. "I, Lillian, take you, Adrian, to be my husband. Not because I have no choice, but because I choose you. Every day. Even when it's hard. Because you learned to see me. To value me. To fight for us." They kissed, and it felt like beginning instead of ending. Years passed. Catherine grew into a fierce, stubborn girl who loved her garden as much as her mother did. 2 more children followed, a boy named James with Adrian's dark hair and Lillian's hazel eyes, and another girl, Eleanor, who screamed like she owned the world. The manor filled with noise and mess and life. Adrian's transformation continued, slower some years, with setbacks and struggles, but always forward. He learned to talk about his feelings instead of burying them, to apologize when he was wrong, to show his children affection without fear. Lillian built a legacy beyond gardens, schools in 3 neighboring counties, programs for tenant education, a women's charitable society that scandalized traditional peers but helped hundreds. Lady Ashford never apologized, but she stopped causing trouble. Some said her influence waned, others said she'd simply met her match. On their 10th anniversary, Lillian stood in the gardens at twilight, watching Adrian play with their children. Catherine was teaching James to prune roses. Eleanor was trying to eat dirt. Adrian looked up and caught Lillian watching. He smiled, the genuine, unguarded smile that still took her breath away. "What are you thinking?" he called. "That I'm grateful." "For what?" "For this. All of it. The mess and the beauty and the fight we had to get here." Adrian walked over, Eleanor perched on his hip, and kissed Lillian softly. "I'm grateful too. Every day." Catherine tugged at Lillian's skirt. "Mama, look, the roses are blooming." And they were, everywhere. Pink and white and deep crimson, rioting over arbors, spilling across paths, filling the air with fragrance. Life, returning where there'd been death. Beauty, growing from ruin. Lillian looked at her family, imperfect, chaotic, hers, and understood finally what she'd built. Not a fairy tale, not a romance where everything worked perfectly, just a real marriage between 2 flawed people who chose each other, who fought for each other, who learned that love wasn't something you fell into, it was something you built day by day, choice by choice, through winters and springs and all the seasons in between. She'd come to Blackthorn Manor as a vessel, a name on a contract. She'd left behind the ghost and become herself. And that, she thought, watching her daughter's delighted face as a butterfly landed on a rose, was worth every moment of the fight. Adrian slipped his free hand into hers. "Ready to go in?" "Not yet," Lillian said. "Let's stay a little longer." So they did, standing together in the gardens they'd restored, surrounded by the family they'd built, watching the light fade and knowing they'd survived the darkness. Together.